LOCLOUDANE.
Hey everyone, Chandler, LOCLOUDANE here with Mrs. LOCLOUDANE, or Allie, my wife.
We're so excited because we've hit 15K. There's 15K of you, and we're really grateful and wanted to do a little video to show that gratitude.
Yeah, and I've gotten some comments asking what my favorite games are. So today we're going to be talking about my 10 favorite games of all time. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this list, and we're going to start with number 10 and move up to number 1. And Allie is going to help me with that. So let's get started.
Let's do it.
All right. So I think first I want to make it clear. I'm not saying these are the best games ever. These are both.
These are your favorite games.
Exactly. And it's not, obviously I think they're really great. Some people might not agree. Each one of these games both has an emotional tie to me in some way or another. A lot of them are nostalgia based, I do actually think these are top-notch games, though. I mean, I do. I wouldn't have put it on this list, so I didn't think they were amazing. So just want to make that clear.
Okay. But
I'm going to start with Pokemon Silver version for the Game Boy Color.
This is an old one.
This is old. So I guess first of all, on the Pokemon series, I'm an old blood. I understand that Silver version probably isn't the best version, but I've played almost every generation of Pokemon, and I always go back to this one. I just feel like there's so much tied to it. I remember when Blue and Red version came out, and people at my school were talking about Pokemon. I didn't know what it was at first, and then you're seeing cards in the game, and people are playing it on the playground. I think I was in elementary school. And so my best friend Jacob let me borrow his Red version. I remember playing it and just being like, But what's cool about Silver version is that this is the first game I remember asking my mom to get me. And I remember her coming home. I remember her having the case is not it, obviously. But she brought it home. She gave me Silver version and Bracken, my brother, Gold version. And like I opened it up, I popped in my Game Boy for the first time. It's
like happy memory.
Happy memories.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of my viewers are around my same age. I'm 35. But it's like one of those things you just had to be there. Mm-hmm. Pokemon the internet didn't exist, right? It probably did, but no one was using it. And I remember seeing Cyndaquil, which is one of the starters in this. I remember seeing a Cyndaquil card before the second game was ever announced, and it was in Japanese. And I was mind blown. I was like, oh my gosh, there's more than 150 Pokemon? And this generation...
because that wasn't one of the 150.
No, not the originals, no.
Oh.
There's a starter. So this is the second game. This is the second generation of Pokemon. And so think about that, right? Like, first of all, the first Pokemon just blew everything out of the water.
Yeah.
And sequels weren't like, I mean, there were sequels, but that wasn't like something you ever anticipated. Not like today. Like if a game does well, you're like, oh, it's going to have 10 sequels, right? Elden Ring 900. But as a kid, you just didn't fathom that. And so when all of a sudden there was more Pokemon and a new Pokemon game coming out, I can't even...
Yeah. And
to this day, Cyndaquil is my favorite Pokemon ever. Like, I love Cyndaquil. So
that's really fun because it was a starter in this.
Well, and that card. I remember trying to convince the girl at school. I tried to convince her to trade it to me, and she wouldn't. And I was so bummed. But
I remember at our elementary school they banned Pokemon cards.
Yeah. Because
there was so many issues with it. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but
it was so popular.
They were causing so many fights between kids that we weren't allowed to bring them anymore.
It was so popular. Like I said, Pokemon, like the start of Pokemon, you just had to be there. Number 9 on my list is going to be Minecraft.
It was a little bit shocking to me, I have to be honest.
Yeah.
Minecraft.
So, now, it should come as no surprise to you or any of you. The top like 6 games on my list are all RPGs. So
right.
But Minecraft, I think that this is the perfect video game. I do. I think why video games are different than movies and TV shows and any other media is that you're the person at the wheel. Like, you're deciding things in this game. All video games are role-playing games in a sense. But Minecraft, you're playing God, you know? Like, if you liked Legos as a kid and you wanted to build a Lego house that you could live in, that was impossible. But Minecraft, perfectly possible. And I find myself constantly going back to it. And you know, for a few hours, it's not like I play it just nonstop, but I love it. I love it. And there was a little mystery to this one too, because I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, but we went over to a buddy's house when we were in college, and he had it on the PC, and it was like the beta version of Minecraft. And he showed me, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what is this? Do you remember? I could not stop talking about it. Like, I was like, what is this game? Yeah. What is this game? And it's never ceased to amaze me. Well, honestly.
we've had some fun times playing it together too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
And it's very calming music. It's like a zen
the music.
game.
Oh, yeah. It's just the perfect storm of video game everything. And it's funny because, you know, it's spawned its own genre, but I've played some of them, you know, but it's just never hit that high note that Minecraft hit. Minecraft just hit a sweet spot. And yeah, it's in my top 10 favorite games all time, easily. So this was a hard one. First of all, I didn't give myself any rules. I didn't say like I could only have one from each series or whatever. I legitimately said to myself, okay, if I was stuck on an island, I could have 10 games to play for the rest of my life. What 10 games would I bring? So far, that's Pokemon Silver, Minecraft. I love the Zelda series, and I love a lot of the different titles. But the one that I just keep on coming back to is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. And I don't even think that this is the best Zelda.
This is like the one that I remember from
Majora's
my
Mask.
childhood. I remember seeing my friends play this. I wasn't into it.
But
I remember the masks switching on and off. And...
Oh, wow, okay. Because I was about to say Ocarina of Time is probably more...
No, I remember this one.
Yeah, well, so Ocarina of Time was just a mind-shattering game. And Zelda continues to do this. The Breath of the Wild, again, mind-shattering. It changed video games forever. But
so why this one though?
Well, so what I was saying is they've changed everything. If I was going to tell you like what I think is the single greatest Zelda game, I'd actually say it's Twilight Princess. I think Twilight Princess did everything right. But again, the one I keep on thinking about is this, and I think it's because it's so weird. It's so weird.
So naturally it would be your favorite.
I can't ever stop thinking about it. Here's a good example. You know, Ocarina of Time. So how this game works is they made Ocarina of Time incredibly popular. They had all these assets, and they were like, "Hey, let's just spin up another one using the assets of Ocarina of Time, churn out another game real quick, and make as much money as we did." Which I think is a smart move, right? A lot of the NPCs in this game show up in Ocarina of Time. I don't remember anything. I don't remember any of them from Ocarina of Time. I can tell you exactly where every NPC, non-playable character, every NPC in this game is in this game. Like I remember the locations. I remember their individual stories. I remember the scene where they're in the mayor's office yelling about the moon crashing down. The cafe quest line is where this boy gets this couple's supposed to get married, and the boy gets cursed and turned into a little boy, and he's hiding away, and it's this giant quest you follow throughout the whole thing, and the NPCs. I've never played a game where the NPCs were so interesting, and it's amazing. You know, I'm playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Yeah, the NPCs are just boring garbage. Like they're all AI generated garbage. And this game is so lovingly crafted. And the most amazing thing about this game is that they just tested out all of these wacky mechanics. Like they're doing the Groundhog's Day thing where after 3 days, timeline resets.
Right. Yeah.
And when it resets, like you lose everything. You lose everything. An idea that I don't think any game has ever pulled off successfully, except for this one. So I think it's in my top 10 because it's the one I always think of.
Yeah.
Like and every time I play it, I feel like it feels new to me because it's just so there's so many secrets and so many weird things about it that you don't remember. Whereas like when you play an Ocarina of Time, it's a traditional adventure that you can it just fits really well together. Majora's Mask doesn't fit very well together, and
that makes sense.
But that's what makes it so interesting. So, is this number 7? Is it number 7? Okay.
7.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah. So, Final Fantasy IX. I love the Final Fantasy series.
Yes.
I specifically love the PlayStation era of Final Fantasy because that's what I grew up with. But Final Fantasy IX is just a special game. It's just a special game. No Final Fantasy has ever reached the peak that this game did.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well, you wanted to name our son Zidane.
I did.
And I vetoed that.
Unfortunately. Yeah, no, I did. Yeah. So, man, Final Fantasy IX. First of all,
is it mostly the story? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
That you love so much about it?
So I'll admit it has a lot of flaws mechanically. It's very linear. You're kind of stuck on this path. A lot of the characters you can use are kind of locked in place. Party customization doesn't come in till later. And I don't really like that in a lot of games. There's a lot in Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 13 is a good example. Very linear. It kind of has the same problems that Final Fantasy 9 does. But Final Fantasy 9's story and characters are what just constantly impress me. They're just so well thought out. They're so good. They're so engaging, you know? And I think it's because they are so flawed.
Okay.
I think
the characters are so flawed.
They're so flawed. Like they're so flawed. You know, Zidane is just this. He's such an interesting character. I don't know.
When you talk about this before, that he's that hero that gets involved that doesn't have to.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, and I love that whole idea of he's the hero that doesn't need to be here. He doesn't need to help the prince. He doesn't need to do any of this.
He's just doing it because he knows he should, and it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. And you know, the story brings him in later. He becomes kind of more a big part of the story. And honestly, I actually think it's to his detriment as a character to bring him in and make him a part of the story. It would have been more interesting if the whole story, he was just a character. Just a guy in a place.
Yeah.
You know? I have to say the love story is top notch. Final Fantasy drops the ball majorly when it comes to these romances and stuff. I mean, anyone who likes the Cloud Tifa relationship or Aerith Cloud relationship knows how frustrating that can be. And I don't know, they've never really written romances very well. I'd say Final Fantasy X does a fairly good job, but it feels a little hollow. The romance between Zidane and Garnet is real. Mm-hmm. I think it's real because perfect example, there's this scene where they're escaping on this airship. They're running to this airship, and Garnet, the main girl, she's climbing up this ladder to get on the ship, and Zidane's helping her. And then Zidane climbs up, and he climbs up too fast, and his face hits her butt, and he's like, "Ooh," you know, like that and stuff.
I remember that.
And she gets irritated, you know. That feels real to me, you know, like that's how good relationships are, you know, like and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think the romance was really good. I also think the character design is amazing. I am so disappointed in Final Fantasy in modern day Final Fantasy character design. I love the wacky party members. You know, Quina is this weird fat thing that likes to eat a lot. You know, you have Vivi, who's this black mage where his face is hidden in shadow. You have Amarant or Amarant, whatever, however you say it, is this like green-skinned, you know, Jamaican looking dude or something. I don't know. It's just the character design is so good. The story's so good. The only flaw it really has is just like I said, the game mechanics. But here's where I'll end it. If I were to recommend the Final Fantasy series and a place to start, I would say start with Final Fantasy IX. All right, so number 6. Right? Number 6 is Elden Ring. Elden Ring, I think...
This doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I think this is the most recent game on my list. Just an amazing game. First of all, I love the Souls games. They're so good. But combining that with the open world Breath of the Wild mechanics,
yep.
Right? Fantastic. One of the most addicting games I've ever played in my life. I could not put it down. I don't know if you remember when we first got it.
I do remember.
I just put hours and hours into this game, and the mystery about it. I think what makes so Souls games you divide into two things, right? Because they're very specific titles. It's a very specific genre, okay? First of all, gameplay, right? And the gameplay is like a checkpoint type gameplay. It's how far can I get to the next checkpoint? Because if you die before you get to the next checkpoint,
you lose stuff.
You lose everything.
Yeah.
Well, you lose everything, and you can go back and get it, but and so in a sense, it's kind of roguelike-ish. I think the other thing too about Souls games when it comes to game mechanics, this one half, is that your health bar is your margin of error. They're difficult games, and the health bar is how many times you can mess up. But ultimately, the game is pushing you to be perfect in how you play it, you know? And so that's the gameplay. Story-wise, the story has always been very... it's all about vague storytelling. And it tells the story through the world. Very, very little narrative. Very little cut scenes.
So you're trying to like kind of figure it out as you're going?
Yeah,
then?
each story, every Souls game has a mystery of a story and stuff. George R. R. Martin helped write the story for...
Oh, I didn't know that.
For Elden Ring. But yeah, like you're learning the story through NPCs and kind of their story. Through item descriptions is a big way you tell it. But anyway, that translated so well to the open world aspect of the game. It just translates so well. They're all about freedom, and Elden Ring is the freest of them all. You wake up, you walk outside after a very short tutorial, and you can go anywhere, anywhere. In fact, there's a part where you can go and open a chest in like a kind of hidden dungeon very nearby, and it will warp you to a late. Like an area that you're only supposed to be in late in the game, and it just warps you right in the middle of it.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's pretty whack. It's pretty out there.
So how do you not like get lost or off on some place you shouldn't be? Do you need to follow the story or follow the game? How do you?
Adventure comes first. It just there's no wrong place you can go.
So it could go on for like ever. It could take you a really long time to beat this game.
Or it could be...
If you just kept exploring.
Yeah, or it could be really short. It doesn't give you any barriers. And a lot of those games make me kind of anxious to play because I feel like I'm going to miss out something or do something wrong. Mm-hmm. I didn't feel that with Elden Ring. I just went. You know, I just explored.
Cool.
So, it's an amazing game. And I'm really excited for the DLC to come out. So, that's going to be exciting. All right, so this next game has some games are really good games, like they're just really good. You enjoy playing them, and some games just come at the right time. This game is both an amazing game and came at the exact right time in my life when I played it, and that is Persona 4. Persona 4.
I could have guessed that one.
Yeah. Persona 4 is first of all, Persona is one of those games that just changed the way RPGs worked. Technically, Persona 3 did. And I remember when Persona 3 came out, I pre-ordered it. Persona 3 introduced this idea of like it's life sim and dungeon crawling. But what they did, which was so clever, is that what you did in the life sim translated over to the dungeon and vice versa. So like when you built, they're called social links, right? Like you would date a girl or get to know your teacher or help an old couple who run some shop or something. That
affects like your gameplay in these dungeons.
Yeah, you build these social links, and that would help you be stronger in order to go do the dungeons. Now, how Persona 3 worked is that you have this one dungeon, which is this big tower, and you're going floor by floor by floor, slowly like looking into it. I thought it was really cool. Persona 4 though definitely took that formula that Persona 3 started and perfected it, in my opinion. Perfected it. I'd say Persona 5 took Persona 4 further in the gameplay aspect, the mechanics of the gameplay. It's snappier, it works better, the battle system's a little more complex, a little better. But I would say that Persona 5's overall story and everything like that did not hit the high points of Persona 4 at all. But then also one of the reasons that Persona 4 is one of my favorite personally is also
our life at the time.
Our life at the time. So I was working a swing shift, and we just had our first kid. And
it's not just that, but I was pregnant again.
But you were pregnant again.
So I was going to bed early because I was exhausted.
Yeah, exactly.
And the baby was asleep, and you'd get home from swing shift, and the house was all dark and quiet.
And I
you get home late at night.
Yeah, I get home late at night, but then the reason I was working a swing shift is that I was at school.
Right.
So I would go to school early in the morning. I'd be at school all day long. I'd come home, see you guys for like
an hour or two.
Yeah,
maybe.
An hour or two. And then I would go to my swing shift for 8 hours. I get home at 12 I get home at 11. And from 11 to like 12:30, 1 o'clock was the only time I got time for myself.
Right.
Because you were asleep, and I had just bought Persona 4, and man, it was so cool because the whole game is, and I know this is kind of like, people look at video games and say this is not what you should be doing, but it was like I got to live this different life, this kind of, this ideal.
Well, everybody has that though.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Like we go to social media to kind of let go and experience a different life.
And live vicariously through other people.
Read a book or watch a movie. Like all these things are for that.
And we had our small little fam room with the TV, and I remember just my entire day I'd wake up and I just work. But then I got to go and live this life in Persona, and it was so fun. Yeah. It was so fun.
It gave me a little chill.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's such a good game. The story's great. I like Persona 4, unlike Persona 5 and Persona 3, takes place in a more rural part of Japan. So it's like small towns, and it just works so well. It's like this murder mystery, and the characters are just perfect. They're just so good, so funny. Man. And then of course, like gameplay wise, it's top-notch turn-based battles. Top-notch. Atlas doesn't make bad games. Mm-hmm. They don't make bad games, and Persona 4 is one of their best. And I have to plug in, like Persona 4 is better than the PS2 version. Or Persona 4 Golden is better than the PS2 version. But the PS2 version is the one I played first.
Right. And so that kind of makes you like that one the most.
Maybe, I don't know. It's just nostalgic. It was the perfect game at the perfect time.
Yeah.
All right. So number 4 is this is my most recent title because this game actually just came out.
Okay.
But there's a little caveat to this one. Okay. So the game is Trails into Reverie from the Trails series. Now the caveat is that this is my favorite game in the series, but it's my favorite because of everything that came before then. So for anyone who's not familiar with the Trails series, massive series of games. It's the Legend of Heroes series, technically. But the Trails series is like a series within the series. And let's see, so it covers So there's 3 games in the Trails in the Sky. There's 2 games in the Crossbell duology. And then there's 4 games in the Trails of Cold Steel series. And I played Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 on the PS3. And I was blown away. I was like, wow, these are amazing games. When the Crossbell games came to the Switch, I played both of those. And then I played also Trails of Cold Steel 3 and 4. And this game wraps up the story of both the Crossbell duology and Trails of Cold Steel. Now,
so it has some like crossover kind of things.
This is the Avengers of the series.
The end game.
The end game, Avengers end game of the series. Okay. Now, here's the thing. If you were to press me, I would actually say that Trails of Cold Steel 4 is ultimately the better game. It had much better story. Trails in the Reverie story is just wacky because it's trying to get all these characters involved and stuff. It rehashes all these different points. It's just wacky. But why Trails into Reverie is my favorite game is that it is just fan service. It's just simply fan service. It takes all your favorite characters, throws them into this game. You play through a story that tries to involve them all in one way or another. And again, it's wacky. It doesn't work that well, but it doesn't matter because at this point you built such an emotional connection to all these characters. And they're so good. But what did it for me is something called the Reverie Corridor. So in Trails into Reverie, there's really 2 games inside the game.
Oh yeah, I remember you talking about this.
Yeah, so there's the main story, which you're going chapter by chapter, and you're switching between 3 different main characters, essentially. And then the Reverie Corridor is where all your characters come together, and it's just Trails fan service. Every single mini game you've ever played in the series is there, right? There's like this never-ending explorable dungeon that you can explore. And you know how much I love aesthetic items like outfits and weapons and everything like that. There's so much to find. There's so much to find, and it's done in like this gotcha style gameplay, and so it's just exciting. I had too much fun. I had too much fun playing it. That's why it's my number 5 favorite game of all time. Or no, this is 4. Number 4 favorite game of all time because it just is too much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good reason for a favorite.
Yeah, yeah. So I've got to plug in real quick. I highly recommend checking out the Trails of Cold Steel the Trails series. Where I would start is either Trails of Cold Steel 1, which is on the PS3 and PS4, or I would go and start with Trails, the Crossbell duology. I'm forgetting what the game's called, but either one works. Okay. I started with Trails of Cold Steel, I would say it's a perfect starting point. But going back to the duology of Crossbell actually works really well because it came before Trails of Cold Steel, and Trails of Cold Steel references some events in it. So, yeah. So but check it out. Great series.
Okay, number 3.
All right. So, number 3, probably the game that I didn't have insanely high expectations for, that surpassed everything I could imagine, and that is Bloodborne. Bloodborne to this day I think is still the greatest Souls game ever. Like they've never been able to top this, and I'll explain why. First of all, Bloodborne was the first of the Souls series to emphasize speed over defense. So it emphasizes an offensive playstyle over a defensive playstyle. Okay. In Dark Souls 1 and 2, having a shield, blocking, rolling, dodging, or not dodging, but like being defensive was pretty much the better strategy for the most part. Bloodborne, like it's visceral. Like it just wants you to jump in and be aggressive.
Is more fun, honestly.
It is more fun, and it makes it feel very fast-paced. Yeah. Very fast-paced, very, very intense. A lot of intense scenes. I love how they did the weapon system. They had like, I think it was like 26 or 27 weapons, but each one has 2 forms. So you could switch between 2 forms, and the forms can range, like there's a spear, There's one where it's a spear, but then it shifts into like a gun.
Okay.
You know what? Some of the main weapons you get at the very beginning is the saw cleaver, which is kind of like the one that you see on the front cover, which is the short range weapon. But then you can flip it out, and it's longer range after that.
So what you're telling me is the weapons are a big deal to you.
Oh yeah, yeah. They definitely are. But the weapons are good. But if that was it, Elden Ring would have been higher.
Okay.
Because as far as gameplay goes, like Elden Ring does what Bloodborne does.
These are made by the same
company.
Okay.
From Software. Why Bloodborne sits at the top though is its story. I have never played something that made me so anxious, but also like one I couldn't stop thinking about. I remember going to bed and thinking about Bloodborne's story, thinking like, what did that mean? Why did that happen? What is that?
Yeah.
You know? And like for a great example, in Bloodborne you're collecting I think it's called insight. And it's these little, they're technically items, but you have a count of your insight. When you've gotten to a certain level of insight, you start hearing a baby crying in the distance.
Oh, I remember that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And in the game, you're just like, oh my gosh, like, what is that? You know, like what is that?
Yeah.
That I'm hearing, you know, like what, and it's so creepy. It's technically a horror game. And I would say it definitely is a horror game. But man, it's so good. I'll link it in the description of this video for anyone who wants to check it out. But I believe it's the Brothers Code YouTube channel does a whole breakdown of the story. And I remember beating the game, having no idea what happened, and I got the true ending. Because there's a lot of different endings, and I got the true ending. I fought the extra boss at the end, got the true ending, and I went back and watched this video explaining the whole story, and I was mind blown. I remember just being like, "What? Like what?" I mean, the whole story is about gods breeding with humans, and it creates like this disease and creates these demi-humans, and how. And what makes it so good, the story so good, which a lot of horror games get this wrong, is it's so vague. It does not explain. Even if you sat and watched the Brothers Code video, Brothers Code, I think is what they're called. There's still unanswered questions, and that's scary, right? That unknown is scary, and that's why I will never forget Bloodborne, and I highly recommend it. It is one of the best games ever made, in my opinion. It's so good.
That makes sense. It makes me think of Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
No, am I thinking of the right one?
The director?
Inception.
Yeah.
Like that kind of style of movie where you're not sure
what's going on,
what happened.
Yeah, and it's on your.
And even if you read up stuff, you're like, I guess I might never know.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And in the whole time,
it makes it really intoxicating.
It does. And I think like you get enough answers that you're intensely involved in it, but you still don't understand it all.
Right.
Anyway, I love that style of storytelling. Like I said, mechanically, Elden Ring is better, but because of Bloodborne's story, it just goes up. It just is high up there. It's so good. Number 2, which is, in my opinion, again, I already said this about Bloodborne, one of the greatest games ever made. And it has an important history in video games, especially RPGs, is Xenoblade Chronicles. Xenoblade Chronicles, first of all, it was never even going to come over to the West, but Project Raindrop, I believe is what they're called. Just this group of people who wanted these Wii games brought over. There was 3 of them, and this was one of them. When it translated, brought over, they petitioned Nintendo. Nintendo brought it over. Of the 3, this was definitely the most popular, and has become Nintendo's greatest JRPG IP. You know, they've made 4 games in total.
Right.
Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, and then you got Xenoblade X. And they're all amazing. They're all amazing. And even technically build on top of this game to become a better game. why Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is still the best one. And this is obviously a subjective opinion, but I think it's objectively better just for the sheer fact that what it did had never been done before.
I remember you playing that one and just being...
Yeah. So I worked summer cells in New Jersey. We won a Wii, if you remember. Yep. And I didn't even remember how I heard about it. Probably YouTube or something like that. But I pre-ordered it. I got it when it first came out. I think it was one of the first games I've ever pre-ordered ever. I've never pre-ordered a game up until then, and popped it in and just blew me away. So how Xenoblade 1 works is that there's two titans. There's the Bionis and the Mechonis, and they're as big as a world, right? Each of them are, and they both die in this battle, and then people live on them. And so when you're exploring the different sections of this monster.
Right, and you like look up and you see the other one. And you can see the
Mechonis out in the sky at all times. And for the Wii, like you go back and play it on the Wii. Now they've done a definitive edition on the Switch, which is a better game. Although I would say that it changed the graphics a bit and made it more anime looking in the Switch version. I didn't like it as much. It's good. It didn't make it bad for me, but the OG style, the original Wii style, it was, in my opinion, better looking. I mean, it was better looking. But other than that, everything's better in the Switch version. So many better quality of life changes and stuff like that. But you're playing this on the Wii, and it's one of those games that makes you stop and like look around in awe. You're just like, wow, video games are amazing. Like, this is impressive. This looks amazing. And how they did the gameplay was interesting too, because it's not traditional turn-based, nor is it traditional action-based gameplay. They kind of took the way that MMOs like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV or Final Fantasy XI work, where you have like this art palette. You can move your character around freely, but you're not hitting a button to get them to attack. They're kind of attacking periodically, and then you're choosing when to use an art from the art palette. And then your arts have a cooldown and all this different stuff. So clever. And it's one of these games that takes a bit of investment. I think it actually turns a lot of people off because it's so different. But if you put in the work to learn it, it is an incredibly in-depth system. Incredibly in-depth. There's so much that you can do in it. There's so much variation, but it's definitely one of these titles. It's like if you were playing RPGs for the first time, Xenoblade Chronicles would not be on that list of first games you should play.
Right. You have to like grow into something like that.
Well, and it's made for the veterans of the genre, and I think that's good. That's good because it makes it interesting. It's very interesting in that aspect. So yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles. I don't think it will ever slip down past my number 2 spot of my top 10 favorite games I've ever.
I would be shocked if it did.
I would be too. All right.
Let's see it.
Favorite game of all time. Technically, it wasn't the first video game I ever played, but it was the video game that convinced me that I liked video games. Okay. And that is Final Fantasy VII.
Obvious.
But anyone who knows me, anyone who watches my channel, I love Final Fantasy VII. And not just love it, but I think a lot of who I am was influenced by this title. So I gotta quickly tell the story about how I first saw this game, because you know how when we build connections with items or media or something through our experiences, and one of the ways that things become impressed on us so much is when they're unexpected, but you always wanted something like it. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're like, man, you watch a show and you're like, this is the show I always wanted to see. You know, this is something I always wanted to experience. That was Final Fantasy VII for me. I remember my cousin, whose parents were like filthy rich, and they always got all the new stuff. You know, I hadn't played video games that much. We had a Sega growing up, so I played some Sonic games and stuff. But I always thought video games were just like, it's kind of like going out and throwing a football. It's just something you did every once in a while.
Right.
And RPGs, I didn't realize were a thing. I didn't know RPGs were a thing. Went over to my cousin's house, and he's playing Final Fantasy VII. And I remember sitting there and seeing Cloud and being like, is that a sword? And he's like, yeah, it's a big sword.
The sword.
And I'm like, wait. Why does it have 2 holes in it? And he's like, well, and I remember what he said was that it has holes so that he can swing it faster because it lets air come through.
He didn't know. He just wanted to.
He had no idea.
Show you that he knew.
To be honest, none of us knew.
Yeah.
I think when Remake came out, they kind of showed us what it was, and it's just slots for your materia, which smart people probably figured out in the original. I never figured it out. But anyway, swords, and then he got in this battle, and I remember she can have 3 party members. One of them's always Cloud. He had Sid, who's this pilot that holds a spear, which I was like, okay, it's a spear guy. And then he had Kate Sith, which Kate Sith was a stuffed animal with a cat riding on it. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. What in the hell is that?
I knew you loved cats.
Well, no, I don't like cats. You know I don't like cats. But I remember just being like, wait. That's weird. Yeah. What is that? He's like, oh, yeah. So you get people who you can take with them, and you can change them out. I was like, so you can choose who comes with you? And choice in video games, to me, like, was... Well, there wasn't really a choice. I mean, Sonic 2 let you choose between Sonic or Tails, right?
Right.
And I remember Sonic 3 kind of touched on this a little bit for me. And it's, again, something that I never knew I wanted. But you know, being able to use Knuckles in Sonic 3, you know, it was like, whoa, you get to play as the bad guy, you know? But when he told me you can choose your party members, I was like, what? And then he told me who the party members you can choose from. And he showed me the booklet. And he's like, yeah, you can get a vampire, which was Vincent Valentine. He's like, you can get a vampire. You can get a ninja. You can get a wolf. And I was like, I
wish we could like rewind and I could watch this.
I wish I could too. Allie, I was blown away. I remember, and I remember thinking, I have to learn more about this. Yeah. I need to know what this is. And I mean, look around this room.
Right.
Look around. Everything.
And that's where it started.
That's where it
Final
started.
Fantasy VII.
That's where it started. And anyway, but funny thing is, I didn't play it for years after that because I didn't have the money to get a PlayStation. And stuff. And I remember my grandma lived next door to me, and she had 2 PlayStations that her grandkids could play while they were there. And I asked if I could borrow it. She never got it back. And then my mom took me to Costco, and I got a copy of Final Fantasy VII, and popped it in, and the sheer elation of playing this game and just that starting to you know, it's just it's intoxicating. The train comes rolling up, Cloud flips off of it, has his big old sword, you know, you're playing through this mission where you're bombing this facility, and the game just does not let up. And you know, they're remaking the game right now, and I love that they're remaking it. I even love that Nomura is like, my theory is that he's making a sequel to it, you know, and it's multiple timelines and things like that. They're good games. I love them. I really do.
It's just more to experience, right?
It's more to experience, but I will say that it doesn't quite capture the magic of the PS1 original. Yeah. There's just something about this game, and of the games that changed the landscape of video games, you know, you think of games like Ocarina of Time, which we talked about, you know, a lot of the Mario series, Skyrim was big game. Final Fantasy VII's up there. Like it's in that echelon of games that changed the entire landscape of video games for the better. And it is easily my favorite game of all time. and I think I will go to my grave, which will be the Buster Sword. Which has been my request for you, a big Buster Sword in my grave. It will always be my favorite game of all time, both for nostalgic, and I think it just holds up as a really good game.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing list, honestly. Big variety of games.
Yeah.
But they all scream Chandler.
Yeah, they've all shaped me in one way or another, and the list is changing. It is constantly changing. I do want to give a quick shout out to some games that aren't on my list that used to be on my list. Nier Automata. When I played that, it blew me away.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Nier Automata is that when you've experienced it once all the way through, you're never going to have that experience again.
Right.
And without that experience, it's a good game. It's not an amazing game, but it's one of those games I highly suggest jumping in blind and playing. I would also say that a very recent game, 2 recent games that I played that almost made it to this list were Lies of P, which I think is a great successor to Bloodborne. Doesn't have the complexity of Bloodborne, and so I would say it's not as good, but it's still top-notch Souls game. And then Star Wars Survivor. I'm not an insane Star Wars fan, especially not of the new stuff, but Star Wars Survivor is the single greatest Star Wars game that has ever come out. And I think the only thing that will surpass it, hopefully, is its sequel, which will be the 3rd part, I think, that close up this trilogy of Cal Kestis. It's so good. And then 2 more. Borderlands 2. I love the mix of RPG and first-person shooter. I would say that I started with Borderlands 2. Borderlands 1 was a worse game. I'd say that Borderlands, the pre-sequel, is not as good as 2. Borderlands 3, I think, is better. I've played a little bit of it. But the problem is they all feel kind of the same.
They're the same.
They're all the same. But Borderlands 2, man, is a solid game. And I love the first-person RPG mix. And I especially love the art style. Cell shading is so good. Speaking of cell shading, Dragon Quest VIII almost made it on this list as well.
Oh.
Dragon Quest VIII is a solid Dragon Quest game. PS2 game. When it came out, it was amazing. It's a little slow and clunky as far as turn-based battles go and exploration, so it's not one of my favorites, but it almost made this list. And the final game is Okami. Okami is Zelda style, but mixed with this Japanese art style. I think it is a special game, and I hope that everyone who watches the video goes and plays it. Has a lot of flaws. It used to be on this list. I think what beat it off, pushed it off of this list was Elden Ring. To be honest, it was like number 10 slot, and then I played Elden Ring, and it had to come in there somewhere, and that's the one that dropped off. One more. Jak and Daxter, the OG Jak and Daxter. Talking about good NPCs, Jak and Daxter has amazing NPCs. I can remember each one. I can remember where they are. Still solid gameplay. Controls are great. The structure of the game. It's one of those games you can just jump in and just instantly enjoy. But those are my shout outs. I would say, they didn't quite make my top 10 list, but they're some of my favorites.
Still love them.
Some of my favorites as well. But yeah, that's the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. That was my top 10 list. Highly recommend all these games. Want to thank again all of you for subscribing. I especially want to thank my wife for all your support you've given me as
Anytime.
well. And more exciting videos to come. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also, if you'd like to request videos for a tier list, you would request anything for my PS2 Beat Every RPG PS2 challenge, you can join Patreon. Join Patreon for $5. You become a pro member, and you get to request a video that I will make. Also, if you join Patreon and become a pro member, I'm constantly talking with them, messaging with them. I love my Patreon members. I'm very grateful for their support. I'm very grateful. I've had some Patreon members who supported me for a long time and then left. I'm guessing because of money, which is totally fine. I want to thank them as well. Anyone who supported this channel, this is a dream of mine, and it's been really exciting to see it grow. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all there.